Greetings and bienvenue, midnight crew. Thank you for returning to this broadcast, and welcome to new viewers joining us for the first time. If you like a video, then feel free to subscribe.
Gonna contribute a bit. I mostly lurk and post in ESMMD thread, but am a long-time Polak. My stories are in no particular order, just in the order I recall them. Going to break anon and admit to being female because it has relevance to certain events I'll be talking about in later posts. I'm going to preface this one with some needed details. Be me at about 15 or 16 in 2001. We were living in Jacksonville at the time. Rent was like $400, but the guy we rented it from didn't do anything he promised as far as getting rid of roaches and fixing the AC. AC worked, but it ended up breaking and flooding the hallway, my room, and my sister's room. She was by me while my brother was further down the hall toward the kitchen. The property that was picked out is overgrown and tons of trees, and about an acre in size. Really comfy. PNG. Mom had only wanted to clear a small amount so as to have enough room for our home, a backyard, and driveway, and leave the rest untouched. The realtor company we went through ignored that, and cleared the entire property save for the part of it that is protected wetlands. Mom broke down crying when she saw what they had done, but the move went ahead as planned. When the realtor had their guys come in to clear the property, there was nothing but white sand left, and a literal line of trees on the very edges of the property. You wouldn't recognize it now as everything has mostly grown back. We even have 3 trees in the backyard. The paths that we had on the outside of the fence are now gone from the overgrowth. My parents let it happen as it now forms a natural barrier on 3 sides of the property, encompassing the majority of the fence with only the front 2 gates being the way in and out. When the realtor had their guys come in to clear the property, there was nothing but white sand left, and a literal line of trees on the very edges of the property. You wouldn't recognize it now as everything has mostly grown back. We even have 3 trees in the backyard. The paths that we had on the outside of the fence are now gone from the overgrowth. My parents let it happen as it now forms a natural barrier on 3 sides of the property, encompassing the majority of the fence with only the front 2 gates being the way in and out. However, the detail about the land being cleared is an important one. Another important detail is that my mom wanted a big yard because we had 9 dogs at the time. The reason we had so many is because the fucking idiots around us would drop random puppies in our yard, and my mom was the kind of person who couldn't just get rid of them. So it was why my parents were looking for a good-sized property. It's about a month before we're completely moved in. When the house was set up and the fence put in, my brother and sister stayed out at the property for those last 2 weeks. No power at the property, so I stayed behind and kept our cats company. Mom was with my siblings while my dad went between work, out there, and the old house. Things were calm at first after we finally moved in. Neighbors nearby, but far enough away where they weren't a bother. At the time, the place we moved would have been considered the boonies as any real civilization was 30 miles away. But we weren't that far out like where my ex-husband's parents lived. Nothing but farms and countryside there. Anyway, the first month was rather uneventful. Mostly us settling in and getting used to the quiet and darkness. No street light for our road, or the 2-mile stretch of road leading into our neighborhood. Hardly anyone my age, but on the plus side no more idiots to deal with. Dogs would bark at the squirrels, raccoons, and other dogs. Now that that is said, I can start the full thing. Will take me a minute to type it out. As I said, things were quiet when we first moved in. My dad worked the B shift so he wouldn't be home till about 11 or 12 at night. So it was mostly just mom and my siblings, and bro and I were homeschooled as my mom hadn't wanted to put us in a public school there in town, so we didn't have a set schedule of when we were in bed. Sister worked part-time at the local gas station while my brother was constantly gone, either due to hanging with friends, or on trips for his Boy Scout troop. Needless to say, I was home alone with mom a lot. Didn't bother me much since I used to roleplay in chat rooms with friends I made online. Started out small at first. Dogs would start going nuts at the front door at the most random times. Initially, I thought they were barking at a squirrel or raccoon they had seen and heard. Usually was the case, so I'd let them out back so they could go bark at the fence at whatever furry intruder gave them the stink eye through the window. Then there were the knocks at the door. We have a metal knocker on the front door. Used to be that we had a storm door too, until we had to remove it so my sister could get through the door with her wheelchair. But the way the door was set up, you had to open that storm door in order to use the knocker. Things were loud when you opened it too. But when the knocking started, there was never the sound of the storm door opening preceding it. You would just hear the knocker, and then the dogs would start barking. If you had spent any amount of time at my house, you would have come to recognize the different types of barking from my dogs. When it was a potential squirrel or raccoon source, the barking was the normal sound, the alarm intruder, with their tails wagging in excitement. But when the weird shit started happening, it was like someone had turned murder mode on for them. These aren't in any order, but are what I can remember. Home alone one afternoon as bro was at a friend's, and sis had choir practice. Parents were out running errands. Just me at home, chatting and role-playing with my usual group, listening to music. Smokey, Australian Shepherd, Golden Retriever mix, sitting by my chair while Odin, Doberman Labrador mix, lay under the window of the dining room. The computer desk is facing the wall, so the window is to my left. Blinds up so I could see into the yard and driveway from where I was. Front door about 10 feet behind me and against the same wall as the dining room window. Had my headphones on so I couldn't hear anything aside from my music. Got thirsty, so I took my headphones off and got a drink from the fridge. Diet Coke was my lifeblood then. Sit back down, set soda aside and look out the window as it's getting late and sis should be home soon. Go back to chatting with friends, leave headphones off. Suddenly hear a loud bang like the door was slammed shut as hard as possible. Made the floor and wall shake when it happened. Dogs suddenly bolt up and start barking and growling. Tails down, ears back and teeth bared like there was something there. Odin and Smokey put themselves around my chair and Thor, Chow Mix, comes hauling ass from the playroom where he had been napping on the couch. What the fuck? X. It wasn't another hour till my parents were home, and by then all the dogs had come into the dining room with me. Some of them were in the backyard, and I had let them in after that as I was actually scared. Another instance I can remember involved my brother. Well, there were several actually. Note that my brother was a major skeptic, and didn't believe my sister or I when we had told him about some of the weird things happening. Always said we were both nuts. Some months passed after that and I had eventually shoved the memory to the back of my mind. I still hated being home alone though. Bro was home one night and chatting with one of his girlfriends. Tended to go out back and walk around the yard as he talked to his girlfriends, as we had a wireless phone by that point, and had multiple phone lines after my parents got fed up with him constantly on the phone. Used to joke that he had a harem on tap as it was always someone different calling. There were times I would watch him out the window because it was like watching a zombie shamble around the yard. Gave me a pretty good laugh. Though you would have never caught me out there at night. Bro finally found out why my sister and I would never go out there after dark. Bored, so I went on the computer to fuck around on one of the various forums I frequented at the time. Bro gets a call, and I glance at him walking by as he heads out the door with phone in hand. Man ho ahoy. Gif. He's out there for about an hour before he comes back in the door.
Were you just outside? Where's sis?
Shake head, cuz I had been at the computer the entire time he was outside. Sis was home and in her room reading with her music on. Could still hear it through the wall when bro had come in. In her room, why? Bro just looks at me like he didn't believe me and headed back to his room. I'm sorry, there's so much. It was a while after that instance that I actually started dating. I was seeing one of my sister's friends at the time. I bring this up as it's relevant to the next two stories. Hanging out with my neighbor's kids one evening. Me and bro were there along with my boyfriend, and two of bro's friends. We'll call them P and S. Neighbor's kids were two girls, 12 and 15, one boy, 11. I'll call the boy L, and the two girls K and JK was a bit of a chubby girl and L was her younger brother who was in Boy Scouts like my brother. J was a short scrawny thing who lived across the road from K and L, and just down the road from us. J's family has 3 acres and a 4-foot fence surrounding the whole property, and several guard dogs. J's family also had a rooster that would crow at 3 o'clock in the morning, and 2 o'clock in the afternoon. The sun hadn't really set yet, so we had all decided to play a few rounds of night hunt. It was basically just hide and seek in the dark. K's family had their own yard fenced in as well. House sat near the front of the property with the backyard stretching back into the trees. At that time, they hadn't cleared out as much as it's been cleared now, so some of it was still just woods. We were told to be careful, and not to run too far into the woods because of how easy it was to trip over uplifted roots and small pits in the dirt. What few paths there were also dangerous without a flashlight. Several rounds went by and nothing unusual had happened. The evening was a little cool, but still fairly warm, so I worked up a sweat. S was the hunter that round. Up until that point, I had tended to hide close to my boyfriend for obvious reasons. We hid in different spots that round. I headed closer into the trees to hide, but lost sight of my boyfriend in the meantime. I can still hear everyone, and could see my bro run by with P on his heels and S not too far behind them. I hear a sound behind me and see what I think is my boyfriend going by wearing a white hoodie. Decided to follow him and not pay attention to where I was going. He's up ahead of me and not responding to me even though I called out to him. I don't know how far I went, nor even what made me stop. All I know is that I stopped in my tracks and looked back towards the house briefly. I could still see the lights, and by then we had brought out flashlights so I could see those lights bouncing in the dark. Can feel my blood run cold as I see my boyfriend back towards the house with a flashlight in hand, and his black shirt that I had completely forgotten he was even wearing when I looked back towards whoever I had been following. They were gone. I don't even know why I had thought it was my boyfriend, or why I hadn't noticed he wasn't wearing the right shirt. I still have no explanation for it. But it made me never go back out in any of the woods out there. We split 4 months later, and I truthfully don't remember much from while I was dating him. It's really only that one event that stood out to me enough because of the idea of someone luring me out into the woods. It also hadn't occurred to me that someone would have had to be nuts to wear a hoodie because of how muggy it was. Next story involving my brother happened about a year after the night hunt event. I still hear the knocking and door slamming. Started seeing shadow people out of the corner of my eye. Found out mom and sis had been seeing them too. Had one instance of sis screaming bloody murder that someone was looking in her window as she had seen a distinct face looking in at her. Bro had gone out to chase them down, but didn't find anyone. He ended up staying the room with her just to be sure whatever it was hadn't come back. I say whatever because the thing had to have been at least 9 feet tall to be able to see into my sister's room. The foundation for our house lifts it about 4 feet off the ground, and the bottom of the window is another 4 feet from the bottom of the house itself when you're outside. Bro has S over to spend the night. P can't make it because he's babysitting his sister while his mom is out. It was after dinner and my mom had Bro take out the trash bag to the end of the driveway so garbage could be picked up in the morning. The driveway is about 50 feet starting at the road to where our palm tree is. Bro grabs a flashlight as it's dark outside and he and S head out with the trash. 10 minutes go by and next thing I know both Bro and S are rushing inside and slamming the door behind them. Bro locks it and S is looking for a bat. Da fuck, Tiff. Bro and S are both freaking out. After they had calmed down, Bro told us that he and S had seen something in the woods by the driveway. He described it as a tall black mass with glowing red eyes. The thing had apparently growled at them, and then actually chased them back down the driveway. Truth be told though, P wouldn't ever come out here anymore after he and Bro had chased after someone they thought was messing around the fence. As they had run after the dude, P had noticed the guy had no lower body at all. Now, keep in mind that P wasn't a small dude. He had the linebacker build and was taller than my brother and S, so to have seen him come into the house with a pale face wasn't something I was used to. Bro and his friends were pretty ballsy back then. Though I haven't heard from either of them in years. But when Bro came running in that night and told us about the black thing, he admitted that it wasn't the first thing he had seen out there. Apparently he had seen things out on his talk and walked in the yard. One instance was someone in a blue shirt by the back fence. That had been on the night he came in and had asked if Sis or I had been out there. There were other sightings, but the one that stood out to me was him describing an old native woman out there in the woods by our fence. Bro never said a word about it until years after the fact.
What an asshole. Didn't he think others would like to know about that? Are there even native people near where you lived?
My brother was one of those people that didn't really believe in the paranormal. He would always chalk it up to be made up by people for attention. With the way Sis was, sometimes it was hard to believe her for things because she tended to be overdramatic, and an attention-seeking addict. Though I feel bad for even saying that much since she passed away last year. I'm not generally in the camp of speaking ill of the dead, but it's an unfortunate truth when it came to how Bro perceived us. He bases everything for me on things with Sis, so my word is worthless to him. As for the native part itself, yes. I live in northern Florida, so everywhere around here has had native tribes in one form or another. When we got to know our neighbors more, we found out that we weren't the only ones experiencing the weird stuff when we first moved in. When I had the ability to do so, I did some research on this area and found out there was a settlement some time ago in the marshland behind us. So we can only speculate about burial sites and such here. My mom theorized early on that the realtor company completely clearing the property had angered the spirits of the land, and so they were doing everything in their power to drive us out. Once my mom had realized what was happening, and she had found the way to do, she made an offering to the land and spirits as an apology for what had happened. As more of the land was allowed to grow back the flora it lost, and after Mom had planted the trees out back, things started to calm down quite a bit. I still see shadows from time to time, and on rare occasions the footsteps, but the knocking and other things have stopped completely. Next Greentext set happened over the course of my time living in Texas. This was back in 2013 to 2017. My then husband was in the military at the time, and we moved about 4 or so months after he had returned from deployment. Due to past issues with his parents, Him returning caused a lot of friction as my daughter and I were staying with his parents while he was gone. It eventually got to the point where we had to move out because of said friction. I won't remark on it as it's not my place to openly discuss it, and it should stay between him and his parents. But it didn't take me long to find us a place in the town nearby. As I mentioned in a previous post, his parents live out in the boonies. The town nearby was no exception to this as its population was around 1,500, and the only grocery store had a tendency to sell expired goods. So any actual shopping was done 30 miles away in another city. Place was quiet. Any shops would close up at 7 p.m. while others were vacant as no one had decided to make use of them. It was basically your normal small town. Daughter was already enrolled in the local school, so updating her info was as easy as a simple address change. I will say my ex and I didn't have the healthiest marriage. We fought constantly, but during the time we were living in the new place, it seemed like we were fighting even more. When we moved in, I hadn't noticed anything as my mind was preoccupied with other things. But once the move was done, it was like some kind of dark cloud had settled over us. At first, there weren't any real problems. Only real issue was my daughter not wanting to sleep in the room she had picked out when we had looked at the place initially. My daughter was mostly nonverbal due to being autistic, and it was only about 7 or so months since she had said her first full sentence that wasn't a garbled string of words. So she wasn't able to articulate to me why she didn't want to stay there. She had had her own room before, so I knew that wasn't the issue. At the time, the hubby and I thought it might have been because her room was on the opposite side of the house. Neither of us were too happy with the layout because the back door was right there at the front of that hallway, so if someone broke in, they would have been able to go straight to her room without us knowing. The only good thing about it was the top lock required a key on both sides, so we kept that door locked tight. Though it was more than I could say for the front door. Front door may as well have been a literal open invitation. I would find it open in the morning, and sometimes at night when I would wake up and get a drink. While it tended to stay closed when locked, it would pop open otherwise. So there were times when we would find our cats outside with that door open if one of us had forgotten to lock it. Needless to say, I spent many nights worrying about it opening, and triple-checking the doors to make sure they were all locked. Be about 3 or 4 months since moving in. Wake up from a dead sleep suddenly with a feeling of dread inside. Glance over at my daughter to see she was still asleep in her bed. Hubby is on swing shift, so it's only the two of us home. Not really sure why I woke up as I didn't need to use the bathroom. About to turn over when what sounds like creaking coming from the kitchen makes me stop. Damn fucking door. MP4. About to get up to go shut it when I suddenly hear something else that made me freeze in terror. Hear footsteps in the kitchen. Heavy footsteps that scraped and clacked like cowboy boots. Look at the clock on the bedside table as the room is still dark. 3:24 a.m. Still too early for hubby to be there as he was usually home around 7 or 8 a.m. Sometimes later if they had a briefing, or if he showered there after morning PTO. Fuck the door. WEBM. Start panicking inside as my bedroom isn't locked and all I could think was that person coming in where my then 5-year-old was asleep. Quietly as I can, and after a moment of gathering my courage, get up out of bed to sneak over to the bedroom door to lock it. Go grab the wooden bat I have laying just in reach under my bed. Silently begging whoever it was to not decide to come in the room. Not really sure how long I waited, but I eventually got down on the floor and peeked through the gap under it to see if anyone was actually there as I couldn't hear anything anymore. Because of where the house was, there was a street lamp outside that the light would flood in if the front door was open to any degree. I didn't see anything human-wise. Nonetheless, I went looking to prop under the doorknob so anyone attempting to get in would have a tough time trying to force it open. And before anyone asks, I didn't call the police because I was too panicky, and I wasn't thinking clearly.
I hope that you enjoyed tonight's broadcast. If you enjoyed tonight's story, then please subscribe to the channel as more green texts will appear daily. A new broadcast will appear when the clock strikes midnight Central Time.
Remember that all videos have been archived on the Odyssey page.